All right, these are the tutorials for all of the countries in East and Southeast Asia. It's going to move pretty quickly, so stay tuned. We'll start in China. China, you learned, has made a lot of changes economically, but not a lot of changes politically. It stayed a totalitarian government where the Communist Party is in total control, but it has changed a lot over the last 40 years or so to become more of a market economy rather than a communist command economy. There are a few things we talked about with China. One was the one-child policy, which you see pictured here. This is the law that the Chinese government passed in order to slow down their population growth by saying that each family could only have one child. It was successful. It slowed down the population growth, but a lot of people weren't happy that the government was making such an intrusion into their lives. It also led to a lot of unwanted female babies in China. The Three Gorges Dam was built by the Chinese government in order to create more clean energy for China as they were industrializing. Clean energy was needed over coal, which is what they have as their most primary source of energy in China. So they built a dam on the Yangtze River and created all of this hydroelectric power. It was beneficial. It created clean energy. It controlled the flooding of the Yangtze River, but it cost a lot of money. It covered in a lot of archaeological sites in water. It covered a lot of people's homes in water and completely flooded them. And to the Chinese government, that was worth it in order for the advantages that the Three Gorges Dam project provided. The third thing we talked about were special economic zones. Special economic zones are what allow China to become more of a market economy. These are special areas within China where private corporations could own businesses rather than the government. So in these special areas, they were allowed to operate as a free market economy. And this is what allowed business and industry to thrive in China and create a lot of money and really improve their economy. Taiwan is off the coast of China. Taiwan is technically a part of China, but it operates independently. It has its own government system. It has its own economy. It has its own industries, and China allows them to operate that way. There's a region in western China called Tibet. It's up in the Himalayas. Most of the people in Tibet practice their own form of Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. And the leader of Tibetan Buddhism is the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama was kicked out of China because they were protesting for independence. Still today, a lot of people criticize China for violating the human rights of people in Tibet, for sending the military in anytime people in Tibet try to start protesting for independence from China. Moving on to Japan. Japan has what we call an export economy. Japan, remember, has very few natural resources, so they have to import those raw materials, and then they turn them into finished goods, and they export those finished goods, and that's how they make their money. So you see cars pictured here, cars, electronics. These are the things that really make a lot of money for Japan. Japan has a very low birth rate because the population density is so high, because they are so developed that they know they can't have a whole lot of children. What's happening in Japan is that the birth rate is not big enough to replace the people that are dying. So Japan, in fact, has a negative growth rate because the population is decreasing. You see how people are getting middle-aged and older in Japan, and there are very few younger people that are being born. Moving on to Korea, this is a satellite image of the difference between North and South Korea at night. North Korea has a totalitarian government under the rule of Kim Jong-un, and the people there are cut off from the rest of the world. They are completely isolated, one of the most isolated places in the entire world. South Korea is completely different. It's a democracy, free market economy. These countries were divided after World War II, and even though North Korea tried to invade South Korea to take it over in the 1950s, with the United States' help, they were not successful. Moving on to Southeast Asia, this is Cambodia. Cambodia was taken over by a communist group in the 1970s called the Khmer Rouge. They were led by a guy named Pol Pot. Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge wanted to get rid of anything modern or foreign in Cambodia. And as a result, they killed over 2 million people within a span of 4 years, making it one of the worst genocides in history. And Cambodia is still trying to recover from that. Their infrastructure was completely destroyed, and they lost a huge percentage of their population. Laos is landlocked, making it one of the poorest countries in Southeast Asia. In general, people in Southeast Asia will be subsistence farmers, especially in Laos because it is so poor. This is an image of the Vietnam War. Vietnam was divided into 2 separate countries after they got independence from France. And North Vietnam, which was communist, invaded South Vietnam, which was democratic. The end result of this war was not the same because North Vietnam won. Vietnam was united as one country that was communist. Vietnam has learned a lot from China, and even though they remain in power as the Communist Party, they have made a lot of changes economically. They have started allowing more foreign investment, more private ownership of businesses, which means that they have been able to grow more of a market-style economy. And looking at this graph, you see that that has had a very, very, very positive effect on their GDP. Burma was taken over by a harsh military rule called a junta, and they changed their name to Myanmar. This group in military rulership in Myanmar is not very nice to religious or ethnic minorities, violates their human rights, and they do not have a lot of civil rights in Myanmar. The person you see on the right is Aung San Suu Kyi. You learned about her as a pro-democracy crusader. She's been fighting for democracy in Myanmar for decades, and hopefully she's going to be allowed to run for president in November. Thailand was the only country in Southeast Asia never to be colonized by a European country. Throughout Southeast Asia, you can tell what country colonized them because of their language and their religion. For example, in the Philippines, they speak Spanish because they were a Spanish colony. In Indonesia, they speak Dutch because they were a colony of the Netherlands. But in Thailand, they were never, ever colonized by a European country.